Hello everyone and welcome to our event today. This event is part of Freelance Futures, a summer-long series of events hoping to drive more equitable conditions in the cultural sector. My name is Emma Jayne, or EJ, pronouns are they and she, and I am a white femme in my mid-30s with blonde hair loosely tied up on top of my head, wearing a white t-shirt, clear framed glasses, and large rose gold hooped earrings. And I will be the host of today's event, and I am largely here to just ensure the smooth running of the conversation and to hopefully make sure that as many questions and comments can be heard in the time that we have allocated. The event will run until 2:30 and we will take a 10-minute break at approximately 1:40. And this is totally intended to be a relaxed environment, so please feel free to access what we're doing in any way that makes participation not just work, but enjoyable maybe for you today. Today's session is being recorded and will be permanently available to view via the Freelance Futures dedicated YouTube channel, website, and community platform. Today, we have My Clear Text providing live captioning, thanks to Carrie O'Brien in advance for their services. And to access this, please click on the CC Closed Captions button. It is possible to access that as a full transcript or as on the screen as captions, and I'll just give a wee second for folks to activate that if they need to. Great. In terms of BSL interpretation, Interpreters of Colour Network are providing our BSL interpretation today. Rachel Jones, I see, has just arrived, who will be our interpreter. Hi, Rachel. I hope you're doing okay. And we're going to ensure that Rachel is pinned throughout so it can be seen at all times. And regrettably, due to last-minute availability issues, interpretation will only be available for the first hour of the session. But what we are going to do is the last half hour of the session will be interpreted retrospectively, and this will be added to the video that is shared via our networks. And we really apologise to any BSL users in the session for this interruption today. Captioning will run throughout. If you have any questions today or a point to raise, please use the raise hand function in the reaction tool or type question in the chat, and I will come to you whenever it is possible to do so. And in terms of the chat function, we're going to use it to support the discussion today. So just ask that people are mindful that it's used for that instead of having side conversations that could become confusing for people that use different forms of communication. And we really hope that that will assist in improving access and inclusion in our chat today. Freelance Futures is a call for collective learning and action to build equitable conditions for freelancers working in culture. And the underlying principle of it is that it will take all of our efforts to effect change. So we welcome everyone's insights and experiences as both independent practitioners or practitioners working within cultural organisations, unions, funding bodies, or in policy making. And given that we need all of us to effect this change, we would like to propose a really basic code of conduct for today. Firstly, please respect and value the collaborators in the room. Secondly, please be aware of your privileges. Be sensitive to when you can make space and when to take space. Please use plain English and explain technical terms or jargon, including acronyms. And please remember that we're all at different stages of learning and that we can respect the person whilst challenging the idea. And if anyone in the room feels that they might not be able to adhere to these principles today, then I just want to offer you the opportunity to leave and do something else, because we really want this to be a generous space. And so by staying, that's kind of what you're signing up to. And lastly, I will ask everyone to remain muted unless you are contributing verbally. And by way of introduction, I'd now like to offer a minute or so for everyone in the room to write their name and anything else they'd like us to know about them in the chat bar. We will do this in silence, and I will invite you to enjoy the silences as we go. So for now, please write your name and any other information you would like us to know into the chat bar. Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you very much, folks. I'll just give another 30 seconds or so for folks to pop anything they'd like us to know in there. Emma Jayne speaking. Great. So with that, we can properly start now. My name is Emma Jayne, and I'm here as part of Freelancers Make Theatre Work, who have curated this session today. And today we're really hoping that this will be a space to hear about the many different forms activism can take. Some of these are commonly discussed in the mainstream: trade unionism, boycotts, strikes, protests, lobbying, letter writing and social media campaigns, but also possibly quieter forms of activism, such as research, mutual aid networks, healing, and subversion of the systems that already exist. We are working on a principle best illustrated, I think, by a quote from poet and social activist Diana de Prima: "No one way works. It will take all of us shoving at the thing from all sides to bring it down." And you might be here today because you want to bring down unfair pay rates, or you might be here because you want to burn down the entire cultural infrastructure. And either way, I'd offer that this quote still applies. However, we're not here today to pretend that shoving from all sides is easy, and we recognise that sometimes folks can be aspiring to the same thing, but there might be tension in terms of how they wish to achieve it. And so naming tension is welcome today. We're not pretending that activism is easy, but rather to be candid about activism, its impact, and how to get involved. And the focus is deliberately not going to be art specific. It's more a conversation about the tools of activism that cultural workers could adopt and adapt, and embrace learning from other communities and industries who, I would argue, possibly have a stronger track record of change through activism than our sector does. I'm also really aware that it might feel weird to be here today, currently, as the Rail Union RMT's members are standing on picket lines, and some of us would rather be there on a picket line with them, and also as their direct action is being framed in a range of different ways by the media. So if today gets sticky, I just want to say that that's good, because activism does get sticky, and maybe progress is sticky. What we would hope is that everyone here today could leave with one or all of the following: either a clearer understanding of where their limited energy and time could be invested in activism, or a broader understanding of the different approaches to activism, and therefore a stronger foundation for ensuring their personal work doesn't unhelpfully counter another approach, or a recognition that we may not all agree, and that space for healthy debate is essential to all of our movements succeeding. And so today is genuinely meant to be a conversation. Speakers are not here as experts, just as people with specific and deep experience. And we hope that people attending will get involved. You're welcome to pop those videos on if that feels comfortable, but also please keep them off. I do know that our speakers would love to see some either nodding heads or like physical reactions from the room. And so we do have some brilliant invited speakers who I'm going to hand over to now as a way of beginning. And they're just going to offer a short answer to the question: what does your activism look like, and why do you believe it makes change? So with that, Hannah, I will hand over to you first.
Thanks very much, Emma. That was such a great introduction. I'm going to hit you up later for advice on how to do that, because it was absolutely brilliant. I'm going to share my screen. I have prepared a presentation, and that's because I find it much easier to talk that way, and I'm less good off the cuff. So my name is Hannah Davey. I'm an Arts and Action Coordinator at Greenpeace, and a while back, Greenpeace UK suffered massive media fatigue. Nobody cared when we hung a banner off the building that we painted in our warehouse. So we had to get creative. So I'm going to talk about my work at Greenpeace, which sits at the intersection of art and activism. I'm generally coming at actions design from this intersection because my arts background makes that the best way that into activism for me. But this work sits as part of a wider campaign strategy made for a corporate or political target. And I often approach actions design as a sort of weird gift making exercise with care and thoughtfulness. So I see it as made with love, but given in anger. So Greenpeace has tons of resources. It's a big, well-resourced organisation. We've got a lot of money. So the work is very high spec and built in collaboration with many freelancers to tight creative briefs and a healthy budget. So while the work is often what we call charming and disarming, it's also often massive. So imagine a double-decker bus-sized polar bear rocking up at a corporate HQ headquarters. We're still blocking the road, but it feels very different to, say, an Extinction Rebellion day of action. But the corporate headquarters is still brought to a standstill and shut down for as long as we can hold the space. But the work is just as often small, punching above its weight, like these little bespoke climate crime awards made in-house for the heads of some of the world's worst companies. The awards have a felt backing, so they don't scratch their mantelpiece, because gift making and because made with love, given in anger, these were awarded by surprise at the most embarrassing moments we could find, crashing a celebratory event when all their corporate peers are there, car industry dinner, restaurant awards. And the work is always disruptive. So these oil barrels double up as lock-on devices, enabling activists to hold position for much longer than if they were just sitting down. And thanks to the scenic work on the barrel, the dirty BP logo stays visible throughout the protest, including when the cops are cutting them out, even when the activists are in custody. So yeah, Greenpeace is super well resourced. And I'm glad to say that we're getting much better at sharing these resources. And we now have an open warehouse programme that's part of our allyship strategy. And as part of our anti-racist commitments, we're prioritising access for people of colour, activist groups working across the climate and social justice. Just a quick share at the end about Liberate Tate, which is a different project, not part of Greenpeace. It's an art collective, because I want you to know that you don't need loads of money to make artistic activism impactful. You just need a good plan. This piece made the front cover of the Financial Times. That's me pouring the oil. It cost us about £150 to make. We would never get this kind of coverage at Greenpeace, even with all the resources. We made about 16 performance interventions at Tate Spaces without their permission to persuade them, as a critical friend, to drop BP sponsorship. And this worked, because direct action works. And Tate dropped BP in 2016. And our work at Liberate Tate is still in the ether because it was created as art, and art is a powerful thing. So this final piece, Tattoos of the Amount of Carbon in the Atmosphere in the Year of Your Birth, that's my 1333, is actually still being performed by us and by others in tattoo parlours, domestic spaces, galleries, protest sites across the world. And these climate tattoos are a commitment to activism, and now, of course, more than ever, that's really important. That is the end of my response. And yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thanks so much, Hannah. That's great. And please do percolate on any thoughts that come from that, and feel free to pop things in the chat as you go, if, like me, you're not great at holding it in your brain till the appropriate moment. And with that, we're going to jump over to Marcia. Marcia, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, I will. I'm Marcia Spence. I am 54 years of age, a Black woman of Jamaican heritage, and identify as she and her. Okay. Now, the work that I do at Marcia M Publishing House is really being a behind-the-scenes activist, I would say. In previous years, I've been involved in activism, ever since I've been an adult, so over 34 years. What I do now is I enable, and I suppose I support people to be able to tell their story and to be able to utilize their stories, utilize their books in their form of activism. So we equip the individuals that we work with, because many people think that they can't write. And, people who are neurodiverse, people who, especially Black people. So I work mainly with African and Caribbean people. And very often they've had a bad experience in school, particularly in the UK, and therefore don't have the confidence necessarily in their ability to do something literary. And so in the main, we work on Black people and mental health. Also I work with domestic abuse activists as well. And we also, as a team of freelancers, because I head a team of freelancers who are illustrators, editors, designers, who actually produce the books. And so through the publishing of their stories, or even the publishing of their books, then many of my clients have been able to go on to be speakers who are speaking on, various platforms, raising awareness of domestic abuse, raising awareness with regards to Black people in the mental health system, and particularly many Black men right now. I'm directly supporting my husband, who has been through the mental health system over a period of 30 years. And so my activism takes the form of utilising skills such as coaching, training, people in creative writing, supporting people, producing the books, and also then looking at how we market the books and enable the individual activists to then get out and be able to speak. They have a book that supports what they do and raise awareness. And also, they're actively working towards change. And so, yeah, at the moment, previously, I would be at the front of campaigns. Now I'm behind the scenes. I think in terms of people of African and Caribbean heritage, writing has definitely been the strongest form of activism. And when we look at things like the civil rights movement, all of the Black authors in those days were also, it was a form of activism. And that type of activism actually really affected immense change. What I also believe is that through what we do here is that we are also changing, working towards, chipping we're a very small group, chipping away alongside others in order to enable Black children also to see images of themselves in books for children. When I was a child, I read and read and read, but I always, when I imagine myself in a story, I imagine myself as a white girl. And that came from the fact that I read books with white people only. All I saw on television was white people. Very rare to see Black people. And so my form of activism, just to summarize, is a behind the scenes activist, enabling and equipping other activists to get out there and do the work and push for change through their words and through their speaking. That's me.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you so much, Marcia, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Okay.
And now pinging over to you, Liv.
Hi everyone. Ouch. Sorry, I just got my eyebrows pierced and I just forget that they're there and I just keep catching them all the time. So I'm Liv. I'm going to try and whiz through what I want to say because I've kind of got 2 points or two positions I want to make. So I'm an artist. I make live art. I'm a playwright. And I'm also an organizer. I've been organizing for the last 8 years with a group called Sisters Uncut. And for me, the kind of activism that I do is often like hyper-localized anti-police organizing. I'm an abolitionist, so I'm moving, my politics is moving towards the end of a police state and the end of prisons. And as Sisters Uncut, our position on that is that policing often leads to the policing doesn't stop violence, it festers it and it like breeds it. And often when the police are called to a domestic violence dispute, both people are treated as equally guilty, and it's rubbish basically. So Sisters Uncut have a couple style of actions that we like to do. We like to do stunts quite a lot. We like to take up lots of space in quite obnoxious ways. We're predominantly working class women and femmes, and it's also predominantly women of colour that make up Sisters. I guess a couple of our most famous actions were we dyed all of the fountains red in Trafalgar Square under our They Cut We Bleed campaign. We were an offshoot of UK Uncut, which was an anti-austerity campaign. We were the kind of feminist corner of that. We jumped on the red carpet at the BAFTAs when the Suffragettes film was released, kind of campaign about this like whitewashing over of the UK closing down all the domestic violence refuges. We've also done some occupations. We occupied a section of Holloway Prison, which is where the suffragettes were imprisoned. We opened it as a social centre. That campaign's kind of still going. But we're very loud and obnoxious, and notoriously so. And I think that that's quite a testament to us. And I think I wanted to say from a creative lens, like the reason I feel very drawn to how Sisters organise is that we're living in really like difficult times, and there are demos every single weekend. And that aerial shot of 10,000 people marching to Parliament doesn't really have much of a meaning anymore. It's certainly not going to get you in the news, which is why stunt direct actions, as we kind of see like as well from For Their Sins, like Extinction Rebellion stuff, these very striking visuals, I think are going to become really important with activism over the next few years. I also think with the police crime sentencing courts bill being brought in, the need to be sneaky and come up with sneakier ways to break the law is going to be really imperative to the movement. What else did I want to say? I guess I also wanted to say, so off the back of the Sisters Uncut actions that took place after the Sarah Everard vigil, we launched Cop Watch campaigns, and we've managed to kind of set up about, I think it's about 11 now, Cop Watch groups. And what those groups do is they kind of have weekly meetings, and they patrol, and they have a telephone tree, and it kind of works the same as an immigration raid might work, where you get a text. I'm in the N15 one, so anyone who lives in N15 can join this telephone tree, and you get a text saying a police van has pulled up at the Latin Village and it looks like they're trying to arrest someone who's 15, and then out of nowhere there's like 50 anarchists that turn up, and it's been really, really productive and amazing. And since it's been going, we've stopped so many arrests in our community, so many kidnappings of young kids just piled into the back of a police van and driven away from their families. So that's felt really radical. My closing thought at the moment is, like I said, I'm a playwright. I try and make kind of Brecht-inspired political theatre. Brecht said, let theatre not be a mirror to society, but a hammer with which to shape it. And that's the kind of motive behind my practice. And this year I've made a commitment as a theatre maker to not kill anyone who isn't an agent of the state on any stage, because I think that theatres are really happy to programme trauma and the deaths of our communities. I very recently was booked to perform at the South Bank Centre for their Jubilee performance, and I wrote a monologue about killing the Queen, and then at the end I took her head out of my bag, and I was banned from performing the work, which led to kind of a big back and forth with me and the South Bank, where I was sending them PDFs of Shakespeare plays, because he literally kills kings and queens every time he puts pen to paper. But it made me really reflect on whose violences are allowed on stage. So this year, if you come and see my work, expect lots of dead police. I'm really excited for where this chat will go. Nice to meet you all.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you so much, Liv. And we are going to jump in to conversation right now. Before we do that, I think it is really important to say that we had also hoped to be joined by a trade union organiser and a lobbyist who works, again, at that quieter end of the spectrum and possibly more in line with government. However, these people are sadly too busy to join us given recent events. And so if anyone from the audience holds those perspectives, please do feed them into the discussion along with anything else that is missing. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask a few questions, but please pop up hands or offer questions or comments in the chat bar. We'll chat for about 10 minutes and then we'll take a wee break and come back and chat some more. Thank you so much to all of you for contributing. And I'm going to kick off straight away because you mentioned sneaky ways of doing things, Liv. And I think I'm really curious about the need for visibility as an activist myself. I find an ongoing tension between people who are chipping away at something and then someone who can be louder comes in and does something, or where that volume doesn't always translate to change. And I wonder how you manage to balance the quiet and the loud in the activism that you do. Hannah, Marcia, or Liv, please feel free to jump on in.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I connect with what you've just, the question, in the sense that, you know, I loved when I was listening to Liv, and it's so action focused and getting out there and being loud. Although I'm conscious that, you know, in previous times, say when I was in my 20s, we were, you know, loud campaigners. We'd be outside the courtrooms and wherever we could, in terms of the arrests of Black young men, for example. And whilst we got into the press, so yeah, we'd get acknowledgement in the press, but then the statements about us, in particular, that particular group I was involved with, was that, yes, they just make noise, but they're not doing anything to effect change. And so it's, so that was happening then. Although when I'm listening to Liv, I'm thinking, maybe I need to be louder. Maybe I shouldn't be, you know, this kind of quieter in the background activist. But I'm still thinking on that. So yeah, it's that danger, isn't it? Are you going to be loud and not so you'll get noticed, or are you going to actually really influence effective change? That's another kind of question as well.
Come on in, Liv, and then we'll bounce to you, Hannah.
Yeah, I guess that question, I think, is something I ask myself a lot. I in like 29, COVID's made me not understand timelines anymore, but I think like
yeah,
2017, I was the artist in residence on the education program at the Tate. And that was quite a big deal for me as like a working class artist. I feel like it was the first time I had a big job that like my parents could be like, you know, I know what that is, and that sounds impressive. But as soon as I got that job, I learned very quickly that there was a lot of non-disclosure acts floating around due to some like abuse that was taking place within the gallery. And there was a lot of kind of scandal around sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I had been campaigning around an artist called Anna Mendieta, who was murdered by her husband, and the Tate opened a new wing and they were showcasing her husband's work, but they owned her work and they weren't showing hers. And all this stuff was going on. And then there was an interview with Maria Balshaw, who was director at the time, and she was asked if she'd ever experienced any sexual harassment whilst at the Tate. And she was like, no, it doesn't happen to women like me. Like, I've been brought up to say no, and all of this kind of stuff. And it was all while I was all in my like first 3 months of working there. And it made me really reflect, because when I've been doing the campaigning around Anna Mendieta before I worked there, and I'd organised direct actions, we had a big funeral march, we stormed the opening, we did all this big stuff. Within a month, they had Anna's work on show. But when I was inside the building, anything I wanted, it takes 5 years for this to change. It takes 5 years for this to change. So I ended up doing a very public resignation from the Tate, which caused lots of change within the building. It was in the news and stuff. But that was a moment where I realized that I'm sure it is good to have people on the inside. I'm also an anarchist, so that positions me like probably not ever going to trickle through the system. But in those moments, I was reflecting on how much quicker and more rapid change happens when I'm on the outside of that building throwing bricks at it than when I'm inside trying to negotiate with the powers that be. But I do understand now, I'm a bit older and calmer, that like you need everyone from all angles having the fight. But I think my position is definitely outside being an aggressor.
Ooh. Emma Jayne speaking. Come on in, Hannah, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I will. I think like I'm going to follow on the Tate thing actually, because it's really, that's the space where I've worked as Liberate Tate, not as Greenpeace, where like it's been the most interesting like quiet loud thing. So with that, we always positioned ourselves as a critical friend, and like I've been going to the Tate gallery since I was a kid, and I love it there because I love art, but seeing the oil company's logo all over it is not cool, and that's, you know, that's my home and I don't want it there, and the oil industry doesn't get to wash itself clean by putting it all over the cultural sector, and that's why we made our work there. But so an example, like one of the early things that we did was really loud, and we took a 16.5 meter wind turbine blade into the turbine hall gallery, which was really difficult to do with, you know, as just ordinary people doing this together. And we took it in, we had to cut it into 3 parts to get it through the doors. We got it in with resistance, we got past the resistance. And then, you know, for a while we were actually really stuck, and we didn't know what to do next because we couldn't do anything bigger. And it was like we'd sort of like made something so loud that we couldn't like shout any louder. And it was really like it really made us feel stuck. That piece was done as a under the Museum and Galleries Act as 92, which says that an institution, if it's something is given as a gift, has to be discussed at board level. And we knew that John Brown, who's the CEO, was the CEO of BP, was the chair of the board of Tate, so that they would have to discuss this piece. So that's why we did it. So it was tactical. And for me, it always has to be tactical. So it might be tactical to be loud, it might be tactical to be really quiet. It just depends on the situation. But the piece that we followed that up with in the end, after like a year and a half of going, oh, what are we going to do, was really quiet. And what we did was we whispered into the gallery the transcript of the trial that was ongoing around Deepwater Horizon. It was happening in the US, and each night we would record into like an MP3 player the words, and then we had performers walking around the gallery whispering it back out onto a screen. So it was this like kind of repeating thing. It was super quiet, but it was really powerful because it was sort of speaking it into the space where BP was trying to speaking the dirt of BP into the space where it was trying to clean itself. So it was just this, I think there's a place for both, and it just depends on how the impact will be felt the most. Especially with the new bill coming in, where there's like all kinds of extra laws around noise now. Quiet things can be really powerful, literally quiet things.
Emma Jayne speaking, because you mentioned being tactical, Hannah, and I think this is someone who I do some grassroots work and some trade unionism, and so I'm a definite floater and someone guilty of overstretching myself, shall we say. I feel like there is a tension between the pace of change that people desire and being tactical. And also I find a tension in myself about sometimes being tactical means actually becoming palatable. And I very much struggle with that. I find myself in rooms with people who will only listen if I am palatable to an extent. And that's where I'm curious about each of you, if you have examples of overlapping with other organisations that use different forms to you, that you maybe don't agree completely with their methods, but have you strategically linked those things up in some of your action so you can do what feels instinctive to you and so they can do what feels instinctive to them, but so it's nudging at the same thing? Come on in, Hannah, you're nodding away, and then I see hand
I'm just super lucky at Greenpeace, which is like a huge NGO that's got a non-governmental organisation, like that's got offices all over the world, that I don't have to do that in myself. So there's a whole load of other people who do the palatable stuff, and there's like a lobbying team and there's a politics team, and they go and they have the polite conversations with the policymakers, and the campaigners will go and have a little bit less polite conversations, but sort of harder conversations, but in suits in the offices with the corporates. And I don't have to do any of that, so that I get to separate off, because that's the luxury of having a well-resourced huge thing. So then I come in with the harder end of it, and what I showed you wasn't the hardest end of it either. It was just how I was making my point, I guess, about my bit that I feel I'm best at. So it's like I get to separate it off. And I don't, like it's difficult if you don't get to do that. Like, it's a luxury that I have, I'm aware.
Emma Jayne speaking, and Liv, could you speak to how that works on a grassroots level as a grassroots organiser? If it works, it might not.
My answer is that I don't really do much negotiating or like playing with, I don't know, from an arts perspective, I'm quite lucky in that from very early on, it's built into I think it's kind of built into how people expect to work with me, that I have this reputation around me that like I've got very hard lines. I also work entirely with untrained working class performers. So like my role, my duty to them is to make sure that they feel extremely, not just like respect, not just like we've got them in the room and that's amazing. Like they need to be made to feel like they are incredible at every angle of what they do. And that sometimes takes, I don't even know that that's a negotiation. I think when I work with institutions, which I am doing a lot less of because I do despise it, I will give them a bit of a like rider around what I expect. So for example, with this thing with the Queen's Head, when they approached me about that show, I sent them an email that was like, listen, if you want to book me to perform at the Queen's Jubilee, you can do that, but we'll do it under the agreement that I'll perform whatever I want to perform, and you have no say on the creative input that I'm going to make. And they agreed, and then eventually changed their mind. But then what happened was I just took their head and did it anyway, because that's what I'd agreed with them. So it's like, and it's annoying because I shouldn't be forced into having a direct action approach to creating art, but actually the level of silencing that I experience as a known political artist is unbelievable. Like no one else on that bill of 10 artists got even asked what they were planning to do, whereas I was expected to submit scripts and all of this stuff. So I would say there's not as much negotiation as there is like obnoxious up-oneing-ness, which I find fun and exciting as a way to work with the institution. I've definitely burnt some bridges, but I definitely think the bridges I burn might light the way somewhere, hopefully. And I work a lot in DIY spaces, and that's where I like to be. I've worked with a venue called Matchstick Pie House, and I would take having a night there that's 120 capacity over filling the Royal Festival Hall any day, because that's where my community is, and I want to feed back into the people that have fed me. In terms of grassroots organising, sisters refuse to kind of, we don't really work with other groups. There's definitely solidarity networks where, you know, like if there was an anti-fascist thing happening in the area, then sisters would probably show up. We work a lot with, we're very much in solidarity with trade unions, we're abolitionist organisers, we show up for other people with feminist issues. But in terms of like ever trying to work with the law or like politicians, that's something we'd absolutely never do. We don't align ourselves with any party. And I couldn't see that ever being on the cards. I would say it's getting further away as a possibility as time passes. I don't know if that really answered your question though.
Emma Jayne speaking, it does live, and it's really useful because I think some people who may have attended this session are people who would like to be activists and are sitting being like, I don't know how. And I think it lends that question just of like, who can you show up for? That's the easiest way to get going. Who can you show up for and how to show up? Before I bring you back in, Liv, I'm just going to bring in Anthony because their hand's been up for a wee while. If you want to jump in.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Just about unions, I'm here independently, but I am also a rep for the Artists Union England. And just to help people with a little bit of insight into the relationship between the arts and unions, the employer and the employee, the union was formed to help improve the conditions for the employee. Now, the employer and the government are different. So the unions would go to the government to help to improve the working conditions for the employee. And with the increase in the vote for men and women after the First World War, there was more power for the employee to force the employer to improve the conditions for the employee, if that makes sense. Now, the government is separate to the galleries and the art market, but because there is a close link to the Arts Council, it distorts the market. And what you have is a lot of galleries that are related to the market. So if you're trying to improve conditions for artists, the government is kind of distorting that ability to demonstrate. And so if you're going to work with an organisation to create change, it needs to, in a way, be separate from that established art system and from the Arts Council itself. So groups like the Artists Newsletter and the Arts Council have too much kind of vested interest. So it was just that really, to situate where the unions are in terms of arts organisations.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you so much for that, Anthony. And that will actually lead us to another question I have a little bit for later too. Liv, you wanted to jump back in. I'll just come to you and then we will take a short break after this response from Liv.
Yeah, it was just a quick thought on what you just said about finding your space. At the moment, I'm working with a youth group called Advocacy Academy. I can never say it, even though I've been working there for ages. And it's based in Brixton, and it's like a summer camp training young people up in how to do direct action. And one of my big reflections as someone who's always worked with young people, kind of post like how Black Lives Matter, kind of for a lot of young people, a lot of that organising took place online. And now we're seeing kind of the dissolving of activism through like it becoming fashionable and diluted through capitalism. I find it really interesting how many people think that they need to start a movement rather than join one. And my biggest advice for you, if you feel like you want to become an activist, is not like start your campaign and become the forefront of a movement. It's find someone in your area who lives on your road who has the same problem, probably is already doing some bits. Because I think the pressure to become the figurehead is actually really problematic. We don't need 100 movements around the same thing. We need all of those movements to come together and be exceptionally powerful as more.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you so much for bringing that in, Liv, because it does feel, particularly in the cultural sector, it feels very reflective possibly of what happened during COVID. Lots of new things with platform and profile instead of looking to what already exists, which I think is, like you just said, a great tip for anyone who's curious about activism. Look at what exists. It can be really handy. So with that, we are going to take a 10-minute break. Grab a cuppa, do what you need to do. I will play some music during this time, and when you hear that music fade, I'm sorry if you hate it, but it's what I'm playing. That'll be when we come back. And also just to flag up that BSL interpretation stops at 2 due to availability issues, and this will be added retrospectively to the video. So I'm also going to offer for Rachel to be able to pop off now instead of waiting for 10 minutes to come and just say hi and then leave. So thank you very much, and we'll get that sorted, and we'll see you all again just before 2. Thank you very much. Emma Jayne speaking. I'm just going to gently invite you back into the space. Music there by Fortet, deliberately chosen because it involves a lot of looping. I personally enjoy it, but also sometimes I think that's what activism feels like, just on a loop, and on a loop. So welcome back into the space. I'm going to kick us off with another topic that kind of surfaced in the chat, thanks to Angarad, and then something that I think I'm observing as a trend at the minute in terms of activism. So Angarad made a beautiful comment that their work is work for change, but they wouldn't class it as activism with a capital A. And I think it leads to this really interesting discussion around who is an activist. I know in my circles, I am a theatre maker. Activism is currently quite trendy, and everyone is an activist, which really excites me until I see how that plays out. And then I think maybe we're not. Maybe it's just a handy title to give yourself, and who am I to judge that? And kind of that balance between this, as Liv mentioned earlier, the intention to be a figurehead and the social capital that can give you, versus a conversation that I witnessed yesterday as part of a new diorama event called The Knot, where a social media activist actually was saying that because they were vocal, they will not benefit from the change that they have instigated because they're not seen as possible to work with, or they're seen as difficult. So I suppose my question to our panelists and to anyone else in the room is really who gets to be an activist? How do we define our activism? And is there any tension around being vocal that comes at a personal cost? You're nodding away there, Marcia, so I'm going to bring you in.
Yes. I would say, I think, I know this is going back a little bit, but definitely the word about being palatable really resonated with me, that I, as an individual, and also maybe someone who's joined different groups, thinking that the members of the groups, for example, people who are working on events perhaps that are about women and mental health, or women and sexual violence, for example. And then I think what I found, so yes, I've tried different approaches in the sense that I definitely believe that we ought to join existing groups as much as we possibly can, because together with that solidarity, I think we have a stronger and bigger voice. However, I can also relate to people who say, right, I'm going to do my thing on my own. And that might be because of the fact that people will label themselves as activists, but aren't necessarily really operating as an activist. So, for example, if their projects or their organisations are funded through, whether it's the police or whatever body, then there's always a leaning towards meeting the restrictions of the criteria of the funding. And so, I've met upon experiences where I've been working with, say, groups of Black women who'll say to me, Marcia, you're too Black, and in the sense that, you're too Black, so you need to be able to, make sure we involve more white women, make sure we involve more South Asian women, for example. And so I've had that experience. But also then when I've thought, okay, let me kind of get more involved in other groups that are perhaps predominantly white women. So very much more, I suppose, from a more feminist perspective, then, I've also found that I'm probably too Black as well. And so those are some of the issues. Who is an activist? Now, when I was thinking about coming on this panel, and, initially I was like, am I an activist? Well, I've always been an activist. So yes, I am. And is the work that I do, is it a form of activism? Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because it's not necessarily, some of the work is definitely going against the grain. It's going against what is seen as societal norms. I also see, as someone who now, has a disability, that, that's something that is very key for me, in even the fact that I'll keep fighting, despite, the fact that maybe I can't go out to work and things like that, but fighting to still make a difference, even though, despite the limitations that society wants to place around me. So I hope I've answered your question, but, these were some of the things that I just wanted to raise, that I think everyone can be an activist as long as you're not too radical, or as long as you're not real. And then it becomes something else, it can become a clash.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you so much, Marcia. And you've touched upon a big question that I think I personally carry, but I see carried through activist movements as well, about how we avoid co-option, how we avoid our movements being co-opted by people who benefit from co-opting them to control them and to control these narratives. And I feel like it's safe to say from the answer you gave earlier, Liv, that the answer for you is just not to engage with those. Yeah. And I'm wondering, if you could expand on that, Liv, and then maybe Hannah, from a Greenpeace perspective, how you balance both of those things, because you kind of sit in a mid territory, maybe.
Yeah, I guess with sisters, it's not often that people might try to perhaps co-opt us, but we definitely had what we called for a while the art school effect, which is you do an action that gets in Dazed, and your next meeting is flooded with middle class white women who don't really want to do any work but would really like to be in the photos, and it was such a step back in time. And also people who were turning up. The thing with Sisters is founded by people who are survivors of domestic violence or work in the sector. I at the time was both, and although we're almost entirely, at the time when we started, almost entirely working class, we also know our shit. And there was a lot of people turning up not willing to kind of do any of the self-led education around some of the politics that we have, people turning up not agreeing with abolitionist politics when that's our very, very core. And so it was a bit less I guess I don't really consider that co-option as much as I consider it, perhaps what we'd call it now, is a bit clout chasery. And I also think that, but I will say that more recently, obviously groups like the SWP have a long history of turning up to demonstrations that aren't theirs and putting their stamps all over it. And that's something that I struggle with more, when you put a lot of work into doing something. For example, we had a demonstration recently where we set off 500 rape alarms at a police station, and obviously ruined a lot of police officers' days. It was fab, it was great. But in the time it took for our sound system to arrive, another party had decided to turn up and claim this demonstration as their own. And I will never understand why people do that. And I will never understand why people think it's okay to step on the toes of other people's work and labour. And I don't understand why people think that could ever lead to any form of movement building, because it just makes me extremely angry, and I'm up for telling people when I'm angry at them. So it just causes this weird dispute very early on. And I think that's a real shame. And I think that there is space for us to hold each other's movements, but under capitalism, like I say, people so desperately want to be the front and the face. And I think that we're living in a time where people like Owen Jones and Ash Sarkar, who do cool stuff, have given us this misinterpretation of what it means to be radical and active. It doesn't mean going on Question Time. It means knowing your neighbours' first names and who their kids are, and it means making food for people and holding space and community centres and cop watch groups. It doesn't mean hashtags. For me, sorry, I'm being very opinionated today. This third Zoom of the day, I'm let's just have it. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that.
Amazing. And before I bring you in, Hannah, Marcia, you were nodding heavily there. Is there anything you want to add? I love a heavy nod. I think it's great on Zoom because you're yes, Someone's got something to say.
That's why I keep going off camera, you know, because my head's just been going and going and going. And I'm like, yes, I'm loving this. I think one of the things I have to say, this platform is just like kind of reigniting me. I think that's definitely it. Hearing about Sisters Uncut, I just think, yes, it's phenomenal. And I definitely want to get in touch, Liv, because, you know, I have been doing a lot of work around domestic abuse and also rape and plan to and sexual exploitation, and I plan to do something further, and so that'll be fantastic. Why was I nodding? So I was nodding because I'm just like hearing Liv, and you're just giving me so much energy, so much I suppose encouragement to keep going. Yeah, I can't even remember what that last nod was about.
No problem, Marcia.
Yeah,
You don't
I'm
have
just
to.
like absolutely feeling, you know, energized by this, and that, yeah, that's it.
Hannah, I'm going to jump to you because I think Greenpeace is a really interesting example of an organisation that I would say manages to like swing between radical action and being at that policy table. And it makes me think of the charitable model a lot, where I foolishly grew up and was told that charities exist so that they'll never have to exist again. And then got into the industry where I was like, oh, cool, so charities maybe exist to keep existing. And that's confusing instead of wanting to solve the problem. How does Greenpeace wrestle with that?
It's really interesting, right? Because Greenpeace actually isn't a charity. We have a bit that's a charity, and then we have a bit that's an NGO, a non-governmental organisation. My work is in that bit, not the charity bit, because charities aren't allowed to do quite a lot of the stuff that the rest of Greenpeace does. So like, but all of Greenpeace's money comes from individual donations. Some of those individuals are quite loaded. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them are giving like a couple of quid a month. But we don't take any money from corporates. We don't take any money from the government. And we do that because we have to be independent, because we need to take direct action. And you never know who you're going to have to do a thing on next, you know, because stuff changes, although it's usually big people. But like, I guess like what I wanted to say is that like I've done loads of grassroots activism as well as Greenpeace activism, and I started off my activist journey doing both things at the same time. So I joined the Greenpeace Activist Network and I did a load of stuff with Climate Camp, and I've done both of these things, right? And they're really different. And when people come and ask me about activism and whether they want to get into activism, like old friends who like find like suddenly like, oh no, what do I do? Like I just talk to them about both of these ways that you can do it, because it's different for different people. Like with Greenpeace activism, you are part of a network of activists, which is very like trained. Everyone is trained in non-violent direct action. It's like people are not allowed to come if we don't think they're going to be non-violent. It's quite controlled. It's very controlled. The whole thing is very hierarchical. They don't know what they're going to turn up and do. They only know the campaign they're going to do it for and the level of risk, which we'll assess based on having spoken to our lawyers that we have access to all the time. Very luxurious. So we go off the laws that we'll be breaking and the likelihood of that actually meaning anything, which is different at Greenpeace to what it is at the grassroots. It's quite hard to get arrested with Greenpeace because the police, it's a bit easier now since Extinction Rebellion, actually, because that's just like ramps everything up loads. But like, it doesn't, you know, no one in the UK has gone to jail for Greenpeace ever, but loads of people have been arrested. It's just that it doesn't go the when you get done, it's lower. It's the lower end of it generally. That could change because everything is changing right at the moment. And then with grassroots, so it's safe to do activism with Greenpeace for some people. It's safe for white people to do it. It is less safe for people of colour. And that's something that we want more people of colour to take action with us, but we want to make it safe. So that's something that we're like always working on more now. And then in the grassroots, it's more dangerous, and there are less safety nets. Like I did an action a long time ago with No Dash for Gas. I was shut down a gas-fired power station. This was nothing to do with Greenpeace. For a whole week, stayed up there, got arrested, got done criminally prosecuted, got a criminal record. That was what I was expecting. Also got sued for £5 million by EDF. I don't have £5 million. I don't have even £1 million, believe it or not. But like, they tried to sue us for £5 million, 21 of us, and we had to raise a massive campaign, like a big petition to say don't take our £5 million. But it was really scary because, you know, like, even if you don't have £5 million, what can happen in that situation is they can just take it out of your wages forever. Like, it's really scary.
Wow.
And because of that experience, I'm now like much more reluctant to do that kind of activism, because I mean, that's not what's going to happen if you do a smaller thing. Like, we did shut down a major piece of infrastructure, but like, I'm a mother, I'm the breadwinner for my whole family. Like, no one else brings any money in. I can't afford it. So I don't do those things anymore because I can't afford it. So I do a safer thing. I do a thing that's actually a bit more behind the scenes. But we look after the people who take action with Greenpeace. And if they got sued for £5 million, Greenpeace would pay that. That's the difference. So it's just this, like, there are different ways to do activism and they're all good, but you need to know, you need to sort of go into it awake, I think, not to scare anyone off.
Speaking,
That was
Hannah,
an extreme example.
it's brilliant. I think it's really useful, and I think it potentially could speak to how some of the people in this room could feel about the notion of activism and that scary prospect. And I just want to draw us back to what Liv said about activism is knowing your neighbour's first name and knowing their kids. Like, there's actually very small acts that are available to everyone right now. There's a thing you can do right now in various ways. And I wonder if I saw your hand up, Liv, so I'll come to you. Once you've offered that contribution, I'd love to draw out some more of those small acts from each of you, or if anyone in the room wants to bang some in the chat, because it can be a helpful starting point. Liv, over to you.
Yeah, I guess I just also wanted to say that, so the police crime sentencing courts bills passed through the Royal Assent now, which means it will come into fruition, like, basically from, I think, next Monday. And that's the police powers bill. So that basically gives police like unprecedented power, but there is a misconception of this law floating around, which is that it makes protest illegal. And I think that that's really tactical of the media to go through this angle. For a start, like, protest hasn't really ever as such been like legal. There are legal ways in which you can kind of do it, in that, like, we have the rights to gather together and we have the right to make noise and we have the right to do this and that. But none of our rights were won by playing the cards that the government put out for us. All of our rights that we have, from the 5-day weekend to a minimum wage, are because crimes took place. So I guess I just want to say to people that are wanting to get into it now, like, you're going to see loads of shit online that says protesting is illegal, more illegal than ever before. Laws are being brought in and out every single day, and like, being tactical is what we need, not being afraid to take action. And the laws change because they respond to really successful actions. The reason it's now a crime to lock onto things is because it's so successful when people do it. So I want to encourage you to, like, not operate from a place of fear. And just to respond to what Emma just said about small things, although it sounds really big, I actually think Cop Watch organising is a really small thing. It's such a small thing. If you see a police officer who stops someone, to just go over and say to that person, are you okay? And I would say 80% of the time when I've done that, which probably happens like twice a day if I'm out and about, that person has been let go. Because when you let a police officer know that you're there and you're watching, and you start to film and you start to speak to this person, it's such a small act. It takes 10 minutes of your time. Sometimes it takes hours, sometimes it takes 10 minutes, and that person will get to be free. And that would be my small act. I would really empower you to, like, skill yourself up on saying to police officers, under what power are you doing this? Is this person being detained? If it's a stop and search, what are you looking for? Because if it's a TV, then you've not got the rights to go in that person's pockets. And all of these little things that will make us police officers' head spin. It's really good to know, and can be quite a small act.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Liv. Hannah and Marcia, I'll come back to you in a second for some small acts. Angarad, you've got your hand in the air, and I'm aware I'm probably butchering your beautiful name with my pronunciation.
No worries. I'm Angharad. I just thought it might be vaguely useful to spend like a minute saying some things I'm aware of how to interact with government if you do want to do that sort of palatable activism. This is just from my experience, so other people might have had other experiences. In my experience, MPs and like councils, they're individuals, they're very different. So like if you're an individual and you're contacting your MP for a problem, it's very roll of the dice as to whether they'll help you or not. But once you're a collective and you're technically national, if you're, you know, several people across Wales, several people across the UK, whatever, you've got far more options, and you can sort of target people who already are interested vaguely in what you're doing. Particularly look down the line of all-party parliamentary groups, which is what I worked for, who've already therefore declared an interest, hopefully, in what you're interested in. So there's the all-party parliamentary group on LGBTQI issues, there's democracy and constitution, which is who I worked for a little bit, and there's lots of others. And MPs differ on what they think their job is, and some of them do think their job is to like change the world. So like they're the kind of ones you want. And it might be up to you to educate them if they agree to meet with you. So like have like prepped stuff that you can like walk them through, be like, this is the state of the world, because they're just elected, they are just random people. So you don't know like who you're dealing with, but because once you're a collective, once you're national, you have a choice. So I think there are kind of ways in if you're sort of tactical and you try and keep up those relationships. So I don't know, that's just from my experience. I hoped that would be sort of helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Angharad. It is helpful because it's helpful for different people to identify their different routes in. I'm going to pop to Marcia, then Hannah for any small acts, and then jump over to you, Ruth. Marcia, then Hannah.
Yeah, these are definitely small acts. One, I would say, in terms of working with women, holding space for women to just tell their stories, speak their truth, and also reminding them of like the UN Convention of Human Rights, you have the right to speak your truth. And just even with knowing that, that can, that's a small act. Those are small acts that can help.
Thank you, Marcia. Lots of responses from everyone in the room. Hannah, over to you.
I basically think everyone should do what Liv says and join the cop watch thing. I'm actually in Hastings now. There isn't that, it's less like that here. But I mean, I think you still need to do it, but there isn't such an organised situation. I've been trying to look at supporting Hastings Supports Refugees, and that's just a bunch of people who, are there to meet people when they come off the boats, because they land near here quite a lot, and like help them on their way, wherever that way they might want it to be. There's just like really easy entry level stuff like transition towns, which I think people seem to have forgotten about, but it's been going for decades, and it's just like people like communities coming together and circular economies within the communities, and anti-capitalist, and like growing your own food and all of that. That's a radical act in itself that exists. And then I just did this tiny thing on Friday night. I went to the British Museum solstice late thing, because I'm really into like standing stones and magic and stuff. And the Stonehenge exhibition there is sponsored by BP. Like, how dare they? How dare they sponsor our stones? I knew they did, but when I saw it there, I was livid. And I did this thing. It was like a tiny act of resistance. It was a tiny spell, really. I took like a hagstone, which I got from the beach in Hastings, stone with a hole in it, and I shoved a piece of rosemary in it, and I wrote "Drop BP" on it, and I left it in the exhibition. And like, that's all I did. But like, I was just like, fuck you, man. I'm not. That's all I really had the mental capacity to do. But I just did this tiny thing. And I think things like that, I really like. I just love doing things, little tiny things like that. Maybe one person finds it, but it just makes them think a bit. Yeah. So there you go. Craftivism,
Thank you so much, Hannah. And now over to you, Ruth.
Oh God, this has been the best session of any that I've been in, and I feel like I could talk for a million years, and I'm so not going to do that because I don't want to take up too much space. But and I've been thinking so much about what activism means and organising means over the last 2 or 3 years, particularly, and thinking about, like, I've had a lot of imposter syndrome about it. Like, dare I even call myself, which I don't, by the way, I don't go around saying I'm an activist or an organiser, because the people on this panel are the people that I regard as activists and organisers. But I think it's really valuable to think about the small, tiny ways that you can try and enact change, whatever kind you're particularly moved to do. And as I mentioned in the chat, I co-run, for want of a better word, which is not really a very good word, but have developed a little kind of online network of cultural freelancers committed to anti-racism who meet online to have a space for solidarity and support, peer supports, cross-racial group. It is small. We've never had more than 20 people, which sometimes feels a bit dispiriting, but at the same time we have really valuable conversations about race and racism. And I guess I just wanted to connect with other people who feel similarly. I also just wanted to quickly say the thing about not starting new movements. That's another thing that I've thought a lot about, because the little group that I co-developed, I know that, in the arts there are groups who are dedicated to anti-racism, but not so much in the kind of museums and heritage sector. There's definitely a lot in the performance and theatre sector. So I've followed a lot of the work of Ink Arts, and in that sort of space it feels quite established, but I feel like the museum and gallery sector's a bit behind. So that's sort of why I felt like I didn't see a space where this was being spoken about. So anyway, yeah, I'll shut up now, but thank you so much for this. It's been absolutely awesome.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you, Ruth. I love people saying lovely things. It's nice. It's very nice. But on to that, we have a question in the chat that was sent to me privately, because this person would rather remain anonymous. And I think it's a really important question, and it will be our final question of the session. How does this actually all translate to the cultural sector? And I feel like I could answer that as someone who organised this and deliberately wanted to invite people from out with the formal cultural sector, if we draw a big line around it, or who organise out with, say, just theatre and the arts in its most elite form. But I think it would be more interesting from the panellists, possibly, if you can reflect on how tools of activism from one area can translate to something else or another sector. Does anyone want to kick us off on that? Come on in, Hannah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Liberate Tate, not the Greenpeace thing, don't want Greenpeace co-opting Liberate Tate. Nearly everything we did there was with people who worked at Tate. Like, we couldn't have done it without them. We had loads of allies inside, and we had people hiding canisters of oil-like substances for us in certain toilets, unlocking doors, telling us ways in and out of the building, giving us intel. And we can, that's literally a collaboration, and it was done. Yeah. So there's a really obvious, that you can just help activists do stuff in your places. I think, yeah. And I just think, it feels like it's really slow, like what Liv was describing, stuff taking 5 years. But the pressure, we know that from our work at Liberate Tate, we know that the pressure that came internally was also, the external pressure plus the internal pressure is what moves them. So constantly hassling your line manager about stuff you don't agree with internally, whether that's anti-racist policies or the board or who's sponsoring stuff. It does work. It just feels slow, but it's the constant pressure. And at Greenpeace, a lot of the time we use the tactic of trying to get workers to talk to their bosses, or trying to get the workers to pressurize their bosses, bring it up in your meeting that day, say you're worried about this. It all works. It's just sort of, drip, 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 pressure, pressure, pressure. And then in the end, people crack, because they're all people at the end of the day. That's my bit.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thanks, Hannah. Liv, I might bring you in next, if that's okay, and then jump to Marcia.
Yeah, I guess my main reflection on how activism influences me as an artist, which is how I've read this question to be, is so like I kind of go through like 6 months of having a creative practice and 6 months of doing support work, because both of them do my head in after a while, so it's nice to flip between. During COVID, I had my first ever show come out, which was great, sold out everything, felt like a legend, and then COVID overnight, so like the entire industry I just decided to become a part of closed, and I went back heavily into support work. And I work for the Outside Project, which is an LGBTIQ homeless shelter. And during lockdown, we opened the UK's first LGBTIQ domestic violence refuge. And I was working there with that team. And I feel like the main things I learned from those spaces are the skills it takes to be direct and tender, and to trust people's autonomy, and to work with people and respect their decisions and the things that they want to do, even if they don't align with what you necessarily think is right. And for me, as a creative who works often with like groups of 10 and 15 people in my shows, it really empowered me to have a lot of faith in their contributions to me as an artist. So like when I write a script now, I write my script and then I give it to the people and they edit it to sound like how they want those words to be said. And so everyone gets to have this ownership. And I think I only have that approach to creating because of my experience of non-hierarchical organizing. So that is what I wanted to contribute. And thank you so much for having me. I actually have to go like literally right now because I have to open another Zoom for my youth group in 1 minute. Thank you all so much. Marcia, Hannah, Emma, it's been really amazing. I'll see you all on the other side. Thank you for having me.
Emma Jayne speaking. Thank you so much, Liv. Jump off. And Marcia, it's over to you for our final words or final thought on that. I'll just ask you to unmute. Sorry, Marcia.
That would make sense, wouldn't it? Unmute. Okay, yeah, in terms of tools that I think other activists or utilise, for me, in terms of the industry I'm in, that I'm looking for like a kind of an overarching Black publishers, Black writers, maybe a national organisation, that therefore when we want to move forward to to effect some change, then we can work in solidarity together. So I'm looking for a membership organisation. I've thought about actually setting that up, as a network, so then we can work together when we need to, make things move. Also, do it, Marcia, I like that. Thanks, Jess. And the other thing that I picked up in listening to Hannah was about the when the Greenpeace, direct action activists are going out, they're already equipped with some training and some particular tools, so they're aware of what will be safe and what isn't safe. And I think most definitely some elements of being able to access some elements of training and just information around the law. With Greenpeace, you have access to, as you say, the solicitors, the whole legal department, that I believe that, it would be great if there was some training available through wherever that would enable activists to understand the legal aspects and also how to be safe and how to weigh risk as well when you're going to take action. And then I had another point, let me find it. Yeah, and the other thing is about what I think we can learn from is if we have a look at, activist groups who are really active, who are making a difference, and look at how we can either connect or even model the way that they work. And so connect with their leaders or connect with people who are involved, then maybe we can model their methods of working into our own practice, I was going to say, into our own practice, yeah. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, Marcia. And that's hopefully what this session has kicked off for some people, is that reapplication of tools and processes that have been proven actually for hundreds of years to work. And so what is offer that we're now coming to a close, unfortunately, but as you leave, please feel free to pop any thoughts you have about actions people can take, links to things, resources in the chat, and we will find a way to bring those together and share them with everyone. And also, please do check out the rest of the Freelance Futures programme. My name is Emma Jayne Park. I've been your host, and it has been a total pleasure for me to be here. And I hope to see you all in organising groups sometime soon. With that, thank you very much. Thanks, folks.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely brilliant.
It was really fun.